Welcome. Tiny Hen's Big Dreams here in our southern Ecuador homestead. I have a controversial conversation today on how do I phrase this best?
I think the move from a plant-based diet to a more animal protein-based diet, in a general sense.
In a general sense, which is the opposite of what you've been told your whole life with studies, with government, with things, with...
It is against what is currently being told.
It is. But I'm just going to go out and say I'm fairly certain that lies have been told, conspiracies have been committed, special interests have brought power and money to bear for their own benefit that is not your health. Mm-hmm. Okay. Fair disclaimer, we have no investments in anything anywhere whatsoever and really don't care, but we honestly do care about the average person, which is our viewer. Maybe slightly more than the average person. We care.
Oh, we yeah.
Special place in our hearts for old men with white hair. They seem like good people. Yeah, and they support us. So honestly, this is just because we care about our fellow human.
And I think it's an interesting conversation.
It is. And it is controversial in a number of ways. And I just keep seeing, the 114 little points of data that get inundated into people's feed and TV and things and social media and like all these little things like, oh, this now we're going to do, well, the meatless Mondays, or, oh, the plant-based diet, or this, or that. Oh, less meat. Oh, meat's bad for the planet. Oh, those terrible cows and things. Oh, it's so everything.
What I'm seeing is overall, and this could be, of course, what I am being shown because algorithms on everything, I'm seeing a huge leaning away from it.
Well, that's interesting because that's generally what the algorithm is trying not to show. So there's probably then a very large amount of simply the type of people in the sphere of things you're interested in are going that way.
Even outside of that. So there's the homesteading sphere, which I think everyone agrees. Like, of course, fellow homesteading, self-sufficiency type of people are going to have a more animal protein-based diet, or at least lean in that direction.
Sure.
Just typically. But I'm also seeing it in other places on social media. Because I am in other little parts of social media, bouncing around, whether I want to be or not sometimes.
Yeah.
We'll just feed you things and you go down a weird rabbit hole. There are people that I have followed for, a decade. And I've seen them change from either vegetarian, vegan, or I don't really eat a lot of meat, I eat meat a couple times a week, to I'm really focusing on protein and we're eating a lot more meat. And I'm just seeing that as a huge shift. Typically in my age range of people.
Well, so that age range of people had in their formative years a huge amount of propaganda of plant-based is healthier, eat less meat. Meat causes cancer.
I mean, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that as a millennial, my generation was probably the first to grow up with that. Because it wasn't when I was a kid. I don't remember ever seeing that as a kid. I remember that as I think it was probably around the time I was out on my own, so 1920, where I remember really starting to see more vegetarian, vegan, plant-based options things.
Yeah.
So that would then be the first.
And there was a bunch of pushes for it. There was the morality side of it. There was the environmental side of it.
The health side of it.
Yeah, it was pushed on all these fronts. Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I distinctly remember when it was pushed in my life, when I started seeing it. And I wasn't seeking it out. It just sort of appeared to me. And that was, I guess I was 22.
Okay.
So that's when I remember it really starting to be seen a lot on social media.
And before that,
there really wasn't a lot of social media before then.
Yeah.
So maybe that's also part of it.
Before that, there's the eternal back and forth about eggs. Eggs are good, eggs are bad, eggs are good, eggs are bad.
I had many arguments with family members about that.
Yeah.
You can't eat that many eggs, you'll die.
There was the
The low fat in general?
The low fat, and I'll just come out and say it in the most skip around the bush kind of terms, they straight up lied to you.
Sorry, that was skipping around the bush.
To put it subtly, I've said it before. People found the original studies that all this was based on. It was a huge political boondoggle. The original studies show the opposite of what they reported, that the government then pushed and based an entire, like, many decades of food advice and things on, and everybody ran with it. The original study said the opposite. They just straight up lied. People found the original study. It was literally molding in a basement after the original researcher died. The guy's wife still had it.
What study was this?
The original one, I forget the name of it, that goes back, that talks about like low fat is the good diet.
So like the core base of like
the original one that started the whole movement. And it's been followed for how long? And now they're finding out, they're like, so now we've seen what's happened to people that have grown up eating low fat, people that have grown up eating seed oil, people that have grown up for a lot of years, and it's not turning out so good. And then you look at people that eat a natural diet with natural, like, healthy fats, fed the correct way, and that's a big difference. And they're doing just as well as their ancestors. America has, I think, for the first time in recent years, having a lower life expectancy than previous generations. Yep. It's gone up steadily, medical things, stuff. Well, guess what? Medical advancements still happening, and all the greatness and all the clean water, and life expectancy is dropping. So even though things should still be improving it, if those things weren't there to improve it, it would be dropping really fast. It's true. So you have to start to wonder of, like, what happened? This is just part of it.
Yeah, it is. Because the fat, I think, goes hand in hand, I think, with the animal protein.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the only fat that you're getting is, I mean, let's be honest. Most people living a more plant-based diet are getting their fat from seed oils. Maybe if they're doing real good, coconut oil.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of fat in plants.
There's
now, of course, if you're eating vegetarian, you can have some.
There's avocados.
Yeah, but how many people that don't live here can afford avocados realistically?
Yeah, 10 of them a day. Well, even the meal replacement things, they're adding vegetable oils just to bring up the fat and the calorie content.
What, like?
Oh God, what was it? No, like the meal, like, shake thing.
Oh, like the protein drinks.
Yeah. One of them Soylent?
Yeah.
Which was funny, named after the movie from the 60s or 70s.
The wasp on your shirt neck.
Nope. Nice people help each other out. That's what we do. You don't question it, you just go ahead and whack me. Right, so we switched a long time ago to a basically lard-based fat, and that's it.
Yeah.
With 1% other on occasion, which has dropped to 0 because coconut and avocado oil here are really expensive and hard to find.
So we just don't right now.
Yeah.
We will probably eventually have coconut oil again. I prefer it for some things, but for the most part, the lard is what we go with.
I think it's actually cheaper now to fly coconut oil in than it is to buy it locally.
I think that might be true, which is crazy. But as far as the animal versus plant, thoughts?
So then there's the rise of the carnivore diet.
Man, I have seen so. I've sort of gone down that.
Then you get your ketosis diet.
So the keto diet started a lot longer ago.
Right.
Now the problem with that everyone sees and sort of went, okay, so like I get your point, but you're doing it in such an unhealthy way. Is they were focused on being in ketosis, and it didn't matter how you got there.
Yeah.
So you had all of your fake sugar, alcohol things. You had, like, if you look at, I don't know if you've ever looked at, like, keto diet recipes, and
I tried it for a minute.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
The things people have come up with.
Well, this is
to skirt around, like.
This is like the fake meat industry.
Yes.
You go to you can either get a burger or a fake burger, and you look at the ingredients, and one of them, okay, it should just be beef. In reality, depending on where you go, it's a short list of other than beef.
Shouldn't be. Gosh.
I think McDonald's is leading the ingredients list by length. And then you get your fake meat.
Ew.
And
it's got some weird stuff.
It's got some weird stuff. And you think each of those things is somehow healthier because it's plant-based, and that's been played off as this better answer.
But even if you're not looking at the fake meats.
Right.
Because I don't want to harp too much on that. We have our opinions. I think that's clear. It's all pretty bad for you. I think most people know that at this point.
The companies are teetering on bankruptcy.
Like, everyone knows it's bad.
Even though they're propped up. Yeah.
But simply in a already whole-ish food diet, because everyone says whole food diet, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but we all have things that aren't.
I would like to peel my avocado. I'm not going to eat the whole thing. I'd like to take the outside off the grain. I would like to...
That's not what whole food means.
Peel the cow.
It's the ingredient diet. You don't peel the cow.
Somebody has to.
Somebody has to. But so you're in a whole food diet. You're in an ingredient-based diet.
Right.
Which is what people have started saying instead of whole food.
Okay.
You have the ingredients to make the things instead of buying prepackaged, super highly processed.
So
but I am seeing within that.
Okay. Which is how
it's how we've eaten for a long time.
Right. Like we buy the things to make things.
But we have leaned further and further away from plants. You may not know this as the person who sits and eats the food. But we have. You look so confused.
It's all very delicious.
Well, I was doing it intentionally because we're big on looking at what we eat and seeing how we feel after. And if we don't feel good eating something, we're not going to eat it anymore. Or we're going to eat it very little.
There are certain things that would cause us to... I remember when I figured out years ago that cereal... I would be hungry. There is pain in my gut. This says I am hungry because I'm a bachelor and I just haven't eaten in a day or two. Which I can sort of get away with. I just like, meh. And then I'm like, well, I have a bowl of like Special K with red berries, which was like my favorite. And I would eat it. Ugh. Maybe I was just really hungry and that's why my stomach's cramping. So I'll eat a second bowl. I have eaten rocks and lead. And it took me a long time before I start to realize, like, this might not be good for me. Because my brain was so inundated with things of like, oh, it's great, it's things, you should eat your grains and your cereals and your stuff and your this, your that.
Your leafy greens.
You make sure you get those pesticides in you in high doses. Yeah, and your leafy greens. Let's talk. Senior kale. So,
a lot of what sort of sparked this conversation was something that I can't for the life of me remember where I heard it. About, as I watched this happen across so many different content creators, where they're leaning away from a lot of the vegetables and into a more plant or a more animal-based diet, and like what things, especially in homesteading, what things they are choosing to grow.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting and says a lot. Like, I mean, what we choose to grow says a lot about what we do. But when I see a lot of people leaning away from the leafy greens that we have been told forever we must have.
Sure.
I start going, well, why? I mean, we were too, but why?
I grew up with Popeye. That was a really serious influence in my childhood. You eat the spinach, you get the mussels, you punch out the bad guy, and you get the girl. All of these things, like, into my little, like, spinach. It's gross. It's slimy. It came out of a can or frozen.
Boiled it up.
Boiled.
We have bad feelings.
If I was lucky, it had a sprinkle of salt.
Memories.
That was
good.
Taste it.
But we have leaned away from eating those things.
And I've seen quite a few people that have started to thing stuff. They started to do the test. They've looked at their health, and they're like, actually, I'm starting to view the spinach and the leafy greens as like pretty toxic.
So the reason, or I guess, I mean, there's lots of scientific reasons, but it was a very simple...
Stink bug.
It's rude.
Stink bug. Just ask it nicely to go away.
Is a very simple way that someone put this. Plants don't want to be eaten. The leafy green plant part is not designed to be eaten by anything. It is designed to
power the plant.
Power the plant. You don't want it to be eaten.
It cannot complete its ultimate goal if you eat its solar panels.
It is exactly. So it is then full of anti-nutrients, toxins, etc. Whereas fruit, and that can be what we think of as fruit.
Sure.
Or it can be the cucumber, the tomato, the pepper, anything that has the seeds in it.
Right.
Is the plant's intended bit. It is the part that the plant wants an animal, or us, to eat and then
spread its seeds.
We are not going to spread their seeds like that. But we have definitely seen how the pigs can do that.
Yeah.
So that is the intended purpose of that plant. That part of that plant. So why would we be eating the part that the plant does not want you to eat?
Now, that's a wide, broad category of things. Like, not all plants are equal.
It's absolutely true. But it was an interesting sort of thought and premise.
So, and then we get into like kale. And there was a big write-up in some major publication, and it was talking about a doctor in San Francisco, and Marin's right across the bridge. Marin is full of very wealthy, very well-educated people. They try to live their very best life, doing all the latest progressive things, because that's what they think is what they should be doing, and they're very serious about it, and they jog, and they things, and they eat right, and they're in his doctor's office, and they're talking about how they're in the greatest health, they do all the things, everything's perfect, they don't smoke, they don't this and that. But there's a bunch of problems, and the doctor writes a thing down and he flips it over. He doesn't show anybody. And then they're like, okay. And he's like, I'm going to ask you one question. And they're like, what? And he's like, do you eat kale? And they're like, oh yeah, I eat at least like 3 to 5 servings a week. And he flips the paper over and it says kale poisoning. And they're like, oh, what? No, it's good for me. Turns out, anyone will tell you the poison makes the dosage.
The dosage makes the poison?
The dosage makes the poison. Not everyone will tell you the first thing. That's just me. I screwed that up. Whether it's water or strychnine, in small quantities or in correct quantities, things can be beneficial. In higher quantities, not harmful. Water is good in some quantities. Water at a certain point has an LD50 and you will die. Selenium. Salt. Selenium here is deficient in our soil. Turns out if you don't have a little bit of it, you lose muscles until you waste away and die. So you need some. Not too much. Too much turns into almost the same disease, but you get sick from it. It's a fairly narrow window, actually, that we need selenium. So the dosage makes the poison.
It's true.
A little bit of kale. Is there benefits? Yeah. Is there anti-nutrients? Probably.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of this is a strict sort of black and white. Eat this, never eat this.
Right.
But it is, I grew up with I guess I didn't grow up, as it was later in life, the kale and quinoa craze.
Quinoa.
So, first of all, it's just gross. I'm sorry. I don't.
Quinoa. We should have some quinoa tonight.
I tried it. And I did all of this. And this is coming I have not always eaten the way that I do now.
All of the people that you've watched that have all gone that way and they've all migrated because they saw all the data and all the people and all the things telling them that it was just better. So finally they're like, well, I want to feel better. I'll give it a try. Being an intelligent person, they're going to follow what they see as is best advice. They see what other people are telling them. That is natural. They go along with what they see as society, even if it could have been an influenced sort of bubble. And it didn't pan out the way they wanted. Now, some people are stubborn and they will stay that way. And they will continue on until they get sick and die, just thinking that's what they do. And other people go, I'll try something different. And then they see somebody going, yeah, I started eating a lot of meat and I feel great. What? Meat? A lot of meat? I don't know. The little wasps. We have like a little flurry of wasps that we don't know where they come from. It's a seasonal thing. So they start eating meat and they're like, I feel better. I have some strength, I have like color.
Yeah, I've watched.
But it's taken how many years for them to like, I keep doing this and I just.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I see it. It's rude. I see it specifically, and I'm sure this is also because this is a lot of what I watch, but I see it in women my age, millennials. I hate the phrase. I hate the term.
It has.
Yeah, I don't enjoy the connotations.
Okay.
But mid-30s.
You are, but do I not identify as?
I do not identify as. So early mid-30s.
Sure.
We'll say. I am watching, specifically women. I have seen so many, and I am one of them, move more and more towards animal protein-based diet.
So they've made a switch to an animal protein-based diet. They've moved away from the less meat, more vegetables, more grains, which is what the government and people recommend.
And it's specifically, I think, there's been a large wake-up call for women, specifically, that they simply need to have more proper protein in their diet. That's factual.
Okay.
And so we know protein, I think we all know, I hope we all know, that protein is linked to not only being able to build muscle, you simply need a certain amount of animal protein to build muscle.
Sure.
You also need it to regulate hormones.
Yeah.
Which is critically important for, yes,
your fats and cholesterols.
Yes. So it's important, which is, fat and cholesterol is incredibly tied also to an animal protein.
And eating cholesterol does not actually give you more cholesterol. No. That's also kind of a fake thing of no, it doesn't.
You also need a certain amount of cholesterol.
Yeah.
Which is a whole funny thing. People are like, what? I always thought it was bad. Cholesterol equals bad.
You eat it, you might as well just pour Elmer's glue in your veins. You're gonna die.
Oh, it turns out you actually need it.
And it doesn't do that to your veins.
Specifically for women, the hormone aspect of protein is incredibly important. I think it's probably struggle. You doing okay? I think it is probably very important earlier on in life.
Yep.
But I don't think any of us in this generation figured it out soon enough. I think it took going through, and this is just generally speaking. I'm sure that people, it doesn't apply to me. I don't care. Generally speaking, women of my age have had children.
Yeah.
And have probably struggled with something along there. With hormones, with things. Now, there's other things that affect that. That is another conversation about hormone disrupting things, which I could talk a lot about. Not eating enough protein can affect all hormones, thyroid. It affects fertility. It affects so much that so many of us as a generation struggled with in like our 20s and didn't have a freaking clue why.
Yeah.
Had no idea why our hormones were a mess. No, there's other things that affect that. But we also happen to, as I said, at that time in culture, we stopped eating as much protein.
Portions of protein have you actually have an interest in historical recipes going back
and menus and
things.
I'm a nerd. I don't know. It's a random weird thing.
You're a nerd, and it's like infographics and food, and there's like a Venn diagram that just says you.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
If anyone also thinks that's cool, there's a Facebook page. I think it's a page that's called Eating History, and it's awesome.
So
I just think it's really interesting. It's got menus. It has recipes from like the 1800s. It's just really fascinating.
So all 2 or 3 of you that are interested in that,
yeah, I know,
mob their page. We're not associated. Interesting. So let me try a little an anecdote. I went to India many years ago. Free-form trip, go wherever I want, walk out the hotel. That way looks cooler. Literally, that was like my whole thought process. If you've never traveled alone like that, there's 2 kinds of people. The ones that actually find that as the most free, liberating thing they could do, and the kind that have an absolute panic attack if they didn't have a plan. Probably best I did that before we met.
Oh yeah.
Put on my boots. Where do my boots want to go?
No, but if I was with you, it would have been fine. It's the solo part where I'm just not on board with.
That could be. We don't know why, but the little wasps like to sting my wife. No reason. She'll just be sitting there. They'll just come up and just like, oh, if you leave them alone, they won't do it. That's horse shit. They will simply attack her. Me, not so much. So I go to India, and I'm just going to bounce all around because why not? So I go. Let's see. I started out in Kolkata, which is in the southeast, and I see those people, and they're mostly vegetarian. And then I went kind of the other way, and I went to the north, which is less vegetarian, more meat eaters, which I think has to do with weather.
Yeah.
Because it's simply cooler. Mm-hmm. You could have meat. You could store it for a period of time in the cooler weather, where South India is hot year round.
Well, you also need it.
You also need it.
Cooler places always have a higher protein.
But but you can't store anything without refrigeration. They didn't have that. So the societies are very sort of, there's a graduated like, I don't know. So you have your meat eaters, your mix, and then your vegetarian. They're very different people. And the ones up north are stronger. You watch workers building buildings, doing things. They're simply more muscular. They'll carry more. The ones in the south, like they're still good workers, but you look at them and they're all just skinnier. There's
just less muscle mass.
There's less muscle, and they just have a certain, like, they just sort of plod on a certain cadence. They're never like, oh, like go think something. If there's a car accident, and there was a few of those we saw in the south, and there's no insurance, so like you're on your own. You have to like duke it out with the person to like get them to pay for it. And they get out, and they just didn't fight. I'm like, okay. So at the time I was like, oh, they're just like a more peaceful kind of thing. They're, less aggressive. And then in the north, no, they get at each other. And if there wasn't like, you're going to pay for the damage or whatever, like an actual fight would break out, and like they would go at it. And then as you get towards Pakistan, it's even more of the more meat, and again, like the level of like muscle and potentially aggression is higher again.
Which is probably hormone related, is my guess.
And then it wasn't until after I'd spent a long time bouncing around that I started to realize that this graduated, like the shading really sort of, over 1 billion people represents meat eaters versus vegetarians. Then you look at vegans and you're like, well, I don't see a lot of you in the UFC.
Not so much. And they tend to be a very mild-mannered group of individuals.
Yeah, up until they waste away and die, which is 7, 8, 9 years. There's in vegans, and I hate to harp on them, but I'm sorry. They feel better for a little while, and they're like cleansed and purified and things.
Probably just because you stopped eating all the trash.
That's also true. So there's this like initial wave, and then there's this long, slow downhill of your body is literally eating itself over time, and eventually, like your face gets sucked in. You start to look like something out of a horror movie. Your brain starts to go, you start not to make any sense, because your brain is a fat and your body wants it.
Well, your brain is made of the same thing as your muscles, and if you can't have any of it, like, that's it.
Yeah. So people that I've known that have been actually vegan and didn't cheat, and that's a huge thing. There's a lot of vegans that cheat, but they only talk about it with other vegans. If they don't, over a period of time, they really degrade, and they just needed some meat. And there's some that have turned it around and gone from like vegan to like carnivore, and just like came back to life. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we could talk about the carnivore diet. I don't know if it's a long-term answer. I've done a lot of research into it because I was very interested in it for a while, and I started seeing a lot about it. A lot of people doing it for short periods as a
health fix.
Well, an elimination diet or an actual fix.
Yeah.
For specifically Lyme disease, which I thought was really interesting. And apparently, it can absolutely manage Lyme disease. I don't really know which one that is, but
the one from ticks.
Yeah, like incredible success. I'm like, well, that's cool. So I had a bunch.
I've seen a thing with diabetes, with
So I had a bunch of health issues, and when I was trying to figure out, I was trying to figure out what's wrong. How do I fix this? So I'm like, well, this is an option. Now we did not have the money for me to do that because it is more expensive.
Yeah.
But I started looking into it more and researching why it might be a solution to certain things.
Yeah.
And turns out, while it can be on a short-term basis, I don't think for most people, unless you have a particular medical condition, I don't think it is a good long-term option.
Okay. And
that's kind of where I landed, like the strict carnivore. And I don't mean, people say carnivore, but then they're eating other things. And at that point, you're just eating more animal protein. You're not carnivore. And you're like, oh, well, I add fruit, and I add this, and I add honey, and okay, so you're not carnivore anymore. And that's fine. Yeah. I think that's better. And I think what most people have realized is they can be carnivore for a while, and then they're like, yeah, but I want some of this other stuff.
And then drift back as your body feels better.
And they kind of find sort of an equilibrium between the two. And most of the time, most people end up with meat, animal products, and fruit, weirdly. Which I personally couldn't do because I think that fruit, while delicious and has benefits, is so incredibly high in sugar. I find it a strange counterpart, I guess.
Okay.
That was a little odd. But then that gets into, nobody seems to add back your leafy greens. Literally nobody. Now, is that because they just don't like them, and most people, is it really the best thing to eat? Maybe it's just not that tasty.
We've actually shied away off the salads. She makes an incredible salad, and not one of these oh, it's a pile of lettuce with a tomato and some shredded carrot. Ooh, no, you can take that and chuck it out a window.
It's the bunnies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then eat the bunnies.
Yeah.
She would make these amazing, beautiful salads with, oh my gosh, they were an actual meal.
They're good.
They're good. Really good.
But we didn't feel very good.
Yep.
And I was noticing this, and I watch. And not only do I watch what you enjoy to eat.
Yep.
I also watch, do you feel good? Because I can tell if you feel good or not.
Yeah.
I know myself, but we are also not always the same person.
Sure.
In what we need to eat. So we'll watch you and be like, how do you act after you eat a salad?
Yeah.
You just kind of sit
Well, it's like the bone broth. You did the experiment on me with bone broth.
Yeah.
Didn't say anything that you were suddenly putting it in our diet, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I felt good for a couple days. This is third day in a row. My joints don't hurt, my thing. I'm like, I feel good. And she's just snickering over there like a Cheshire cat. I'm like, woman, what did you do? Don't mess with my food. She goes, well, I didn't want to tell you. I'm like, okay, this is our version of a double-blind study. She does it double and I'm blind. Yeah.
Otherwise, it wouldn't work.
But no, and she waited for me to say something without any knowledge and I felt better. I'm like, okay, bone broth.
Okay.
What's your vegetarian equivalent to that?
Oh, it doesn't really have much.
There
going
isn't
on.
one.
Nope.
If you don't have bone broth, there is no vegetarian vegan option.
Nope.
Your joints will hurt.
Yeah. And if
You will think it's normal.
And if you are going to be strict about it, you wouldn't be taking a collagen supplement either, because that comes from an animal. You simply don't get collagen. I never thought about that. How do you don't get that in your diet at all? That's alarming, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and we've talked before about like where you get your fats and your meats, and that's also important. Let's not forget.
Because, oh my gosh, I got so frustrated. I'm just gonna hang up for a second. The people who do the carnivore diet, it's so amazing. It's totally saved my life and all of this. And someone asked one of them, well, I can't afford, grass-fed, grass-finished steaks and things. Like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, well, just buy the cheapest meat you can possibly get. It's still a good idea. I'm like, oh, I don't know if you want to buy ground beef in a tube from Walmart and call that a good diet.
Yeah, so with your low-end meat comes, one, it's your risk of contaminations, which happen all the time just because of the nature. Whenever there's recall, it's always the tube meat. Like, come on now.
You don't know what's in that ground meat.
There's also... they're not going to take their best like cattle that have grazed out on the lands of the good genetics and the things and the something. And no, those are like old dairy cows from feedlots beyond their years. Is it good protein? Sure, and
it's protein. I wouldn't say it's good.
And if I have a friend or even my son who is like not able to like afford anything else, be like, at least eat that.
It is better than nothing. But to say it is a good option is what bothers me.
And so the one thing that I have data on, and we've mentioned it before, is lard. And with pigs, they say, oh, pork is terrible, it's bad for you, it's okay. And that's sort of right and sort of wrong. Yes, from grain-fed feedlot commercial hogs, it's not entirely healthy. They're fed a ton of antibiotics, which also doesn't help. But the fat itself is different. It's just a different fat. Is it molecularly different? Is it... If you look at the omega-3/6 balances on your commercial cheapo white pork from the grocery store, it's terrible. It's everything that they say is why you shouldn't eat it. If you look at the omega-3/6 balance of a pasture-raised pig, that a person who just happens to have some land, has a bunch of pigs, and they run around and they eat the grass and they do this stuff, especially the heritage breeds that are less interested in just eat grain, all of it, and they'll graze and they'll eat the grass and they'll eat the bugs. Okay. The omega-3/6 balance goes from terrible to right about the same as salmon, which is what they tell you is ideal. It's actually really good. It makes it healthy. Delicious too. Let me talk about delicious, melt in your mouth, buttery, oh my gosh, yum. Pork that you couldn't tell, like the deep, rich color. It could be filet mignon, but with better fat and flavor. That's pork. If your pork doesn't look like that, it's not good pork. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's almost impossible to buy good pork. If you don't buy it from a specialty provider who pasture raises it, it's probably not good pork.
It's true.
You just look at it. Is it white? Pink? Yeah, it's crap. Is it a beautiful, deep, like red, purple kind of color? Is it got, like fat and
so good.
It's worth it. It costs more, but it's worth it. Now that fat is different. One of the ways that we just be off the cuff, how do we tell? You clean up. You take your cutting board. If it's cheapo commodity pig, the fat
just washes off.
And it does it with crappy soap.
It does it with water.
We use the most crappy soap possible. It's baby soap. It has nothing in it that actually does much of anything fat cutting. It doesn't have SLS because that causes other health issues. Which if you get mouth sores things and you're like, well, I just get like sores. Stop with all the SLS, sodium lauryl sulfate. Get it out of your toothpaste, your mouthwash, your soaps, your dish soap. Magically, all these things go away. Anyway. The fat just washes off. Cutting board squeaky clean. And you take our pigs, or pigs that were raised, with eating all the things, and they're healthy and they're strong. They're physically harder to process because their joints are strong and their tissues are strong, and the little connective tissues that like hold like muscle to intestine, like you just can't break them.
It's true.
On a commercial hog, everything just falls apart. The legs break. We've actually like processing like, oh, somehow in the middle of this we broke ribs. We didn't kick the pig.
Nope.
But the fat doesn't wash off. And you wash, and it's still there. Your hand's slippery, and you wash, and it's still there. And it's slippery, and slippery, and slippery, and you can't actually break that fat.
Good fat.
I used to sell snowboard wax, and the guy used the Lawrence Livermore Labs. I guess his brother worked there, so he would like use the equipment, and he engineered a whole new line of snowboarding wax. It was kind of neat. And he actually started taking the molecules, and he went from short chain hydrocarbon molecules, which was the traditional kind of wax, and then he got longer ones, and finally got these really long hydrocarbon chains. So they just would break down more slowly, and they would wear longer and be slipperier. And then he figured out how to make ring molecules and link them back together, which made them even stronger to resist breaking. And the wax really just stayed on the board amazingly, and was just slippery beyond belief. It was just a better molecule of a wax.
Which is the same thing in the lard.
Funny, yeah. And that's just the how you can tell the difference without having the scientific testing. That's the correlation that we have seen.
Yeah. Luckily, I was almost done. The other thing with the lard, as a side note, it's consistency at fridge temp. If it's hard, hard, it's really good. If you can pour it out of the fridge, this is less good.
Yeah.
Which I think has the same. It's the same thing. It's the same structure.
It speaks to the thing. So, where you get your fats and your meats.
Your eggs, your milk, any animal product you are eating is not all created equal. Your pasteurized milk is not the same as raw milk. Your cow milk and your goat milk are different. Your commodity eggs are completely different than your free range eggs.
If your cow eats, just corn and things and stuff, it makes milk. It does. If it's eating like beautiful lush grass, it makes fattier, more delicious milk with more things in it.
Far more nutrients.
If you go to Hawaii and you go to the local grocery store, they sell Daisy sour cream. This is dated information. Probably still do, but maybe don't. I grew up eating Daisy sour cream, lived in California. It's a standard brand. It's pretty good. Put it on a burrito. Happy day. Go to Hawaii. Need some sour cream, see the big tub of Daisy, figure it's the same, take it home, put it on something, take it, a bite of it. What? What is this? What? Oh my goodness. I almost just wanted to eat it with a spoon. It was so creamy, so delicious. It was just like a sweeter, it was supposed to be the same thing. The label was the same. Haleakala Dairy. Local. Mm-hmm. Those cows lived, if you look up the Haleakala Dairy, there's a huge expanse of lush grasslands, old volcanic soils, right on the coast. They can see the ocean. Not only are they happy cows, they're eating all this beautiful lush grass that year-round.
It's good life.
Yeah. So remember the whole California thing of happy cows make happy dairy products or something? In California, if you go to the place where they have all the cows, it is not happy.
They're not happy.
Oh.
It's gross.
You drive down I-5, let me tell you can't drive fast enough with the windows up tight enough to get past that smell of brown wasteland of cow. Ew. But Hawaii, where they eat lush grass, totally different.
Yeah.
Those are happy cows. And they make really happy sour cream.
It's true. Cows here are happy. The creatures here are happy because it's green. They eat green things. They eat natural for the most part.
You pay more for good cheese that came from somewhere, Switzerland, France, up in the mountains, somewhere where they ate really nutritious grasses, and they make really good cheese versus a cheapo commodity cheese from commodity milk, which it's not going to win any awards.
Mm-hmm. And it's all the flavor and it's all delicious, but it also has such a different protein, fat, nutrient profile that it's almost non-comparable.
And there is health benefits, but there's a war against being healthy. It almost seems. We looked up the other night. I don't know. It came up. If you've ever seen the court case against the Amish, the Miller farm. Something came up, so I went and I checked into it. I was looking at it. The Millers sold through a membership, like you buy membership to their farm, so
it's like a herd share.
I'm not sure,
okay.
But it was like it wasn't just public. Like you had to buy in at a one-time membership fee, and once you're a member, then like they could sell you raw milk, raw cheese, soft cheese. They sold colostrum. They sold yogurts, things like this whole range of products, as well as meats and things. The Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture is absolutely trying to shut them down, get rid of them, close them. There was a hearing. It was sort of comically bad, where the information on the warrant with the testing from some of their milk, they're like, okay, the defense brings in an actual FDA microbiologist, former, and you're like, yeah, so you found listeria in 8 of the 30 samples. That's great. What was the number? Because the dosage makes the poison. There's listeria everywhere. Our normal number to get sick is 10,000. Canada uses 100,000 somethings per something. But we don't have that. But that was your warrant. That was what you went in and destroyed all of their things, stopped their entire business, like shut them down, this and that, based on these tests. But you don't have the tests? No. And you're not allowed to ask for them. And we won't provide them. Ever.
Which we all just know what that means.
Why are you going after the people that sell them?
Yeah. There's some...
It's a strange thing. Now, the funny thing is they said they could apply for a permit, but then they could only sell raw milk, raw yogurt, and cheese cured for 60 days. All of the other products, the soft cheeses and the colostrum and some of the other stuff like that, straight up banned.
I don't understand that.
If you can then buy those other products that are now less evil with a permit, what makes the other ones so evil? Why is it, like conspiracy hat time of like, what are you trying to prevent? Because they talk about some of the healing aspects of the colostrum, otherwise known as like liquid gold.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my gosh, if you have a sick creature, do you have some of the original colostrum?
Or a sick human.
Or a sick human.
I may or may not have squirreled some away. You never know when you might need it.
You never know. Which is sort of magical in a bunch of respects of like, okay.
Yeah. It is a strange and twisty. I don't even know. Is it a conversation? Past a conversation at this point.
Let me end it on the one note from that the FDA responded officially in documents to the court about the case of people do not have a historical right, or I forget the exact wording, but historically they don't have the right to choose their own food or the food of their families.
Or what they do not eat.
What they do or do not eat. It is not your right. That was their argument. Only they can decide what you can and cannot eat.
And the historical part really got me.
And that's the basis of their defense argument.
Not only now you can't choose, but historically there's no...
That they have always had some sort of overseeing hand making sure you couldn't eat. I don't know, I think back to some of my history I learned going back to 3rd grade. People pretty much eat whatever they get their hands on.
Yeah.
Up until, like, so the question is, what do they call historical? What is this?
What is history to them?
Are you trying
Is it the history of the FDA? Because then I might believe that more.
I have questions about why there needs to be an FDA in its present form at all. and its revolving door with industries and things and pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But we're not conspiracy theorists.
We're conspiracy factists. Because that crap's all real.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no theory about that. Like,
I think that we would all agree that we should have the right to choose what we do and do not eat.
Yeah.
As a basic human right.
Yeah.
It seems like one
autonomy of self. Can I choose what I put in my body? Can I stop you from putting things in my body? I don't want to eat bugs. Can I stop that? Am I not allowed to resist? I, don't want hormones, synthetics in my food. Am I allowed to choose, organic things? Or is there certain cases where certain people are prevented from even growing an organic way?
It is going in that direction.
I remember when there was the mad cow disease, and there was I think it's a big rancher out of Texas just said, we're going to just test every cow. It's like $50 for the test. Cows were thousands.
Yeah.
Fine. We can make up $50 on the price. We'll put it on the label. Every cow tested. Any cow that didn't pass the test, out. Well, okay, $50 things, 1,000 pounds of meat or something, like whatever it is, like that's pennies. I would pay that. Well, it turns out a lot of people would have paid it. They prevented them. They sued them, so they could not test.
I did not know this.
They sued them. They made them stop. You are not allowed to independently test. Only we
test for the disease. That's a huge problem.
We, as the FDA or whoever's in charge of it, can come in, or the USDA, can come in and test and say whether it is or is not safe. And only we are the authority, and you don't get to say it, and you can't offer a better product in an open market.
Oh boy!
These things exist all over the place in government. Like they sort of just get out of control with it. But maybe that's getting off topic.
Never.
So, eat meat, have a good time. I did have my blood work tested when we made the switch to lard, and then a few years later I had it tested again, and I actually lost years per the Kaiser full blood test workup thing, because my little brother's like, you're going to die, you're going to eat lard, and I'm like, yeah, mouth breather. We no longer get along. I'm like, fine, I'll go to the doctor and I'll have it tested. And I did before I started it, and I did a couple of years later, and every single measure got better, and I got healthier, and I actually showed up as younger per all the blood work tests.
I managed to gain you back a few years there.
After 2 years, I was younger than the first test.
Look at that.
Imagine what I am now. So, there we go.
That's our 2 cents.
That's our 2 cents. Controversial conversation. Let us know what you think. Hopefully the camera's still working, unlike the last time that it just quit.
This was take 2.
We struggle so much with technology. My phone is on its last legs, and it just stops sometimes if we do these things over and over and over. It's good times. Please subscribe if you haven't. And if you have an idea for a conversation, heck, send it in. Maybe we'll do it. See you for the next one. Ooh, you will not sting my wife. Ass hat. Okay, now this is... Miraculous losing it to that. Oh! Sucks to be you. Oh! Another one bites the dust.